Chapter 7. Dorothy's Cowardice. Dorothy Carstairs had made up her mind. She would tell Everard the whole truth about baby's fall and be forgiven. Even to be punished would not be so bad as to go on with a secret on her heart like this. But it was not punishment that she expected or feared. It was having to own that she had deliberately disobeyed her brother's special injunction, and that darling baby had been hurt. But Mr. Walter's story had deeply impressed her, and she felt that a clear conscience she must have at any cost. It would be dreadful to have to tell, she knew, with Everard's kind, unsuspecting eyes upon her all the time. She could not think how she should do it. Yet she forgot to ask for help where Everard had taught her help to do right might always be found, kneeling in prayer to God. It was Sunday, the day following the visit to Bramble Wood. There was no opportunity, so it seemed, to speak to her brother before church. She must seek him quite alone by and by. But she found that an old gentleman, a friend of her father, was coming to dine with them. She could not speak before him, and so the confession was still deferred, and every hour Dorothy's courage, which had seemed sufficiently screwed up when she rose in the morning, fell to a lower ebb. But still, I will really tell him before I go to bed, she said to herself. Dorothy and baby always dined with Everard on the only day in the week that he was at home. For baby, since a little over a year old, had sat at table in his high chair, and was generally as good as gold, with Dada close beside him to superintend his plate and spoon. Mr. Brandon, the visitor, was a dear old gentleman, the father and grandfather of quite a large family, and he would not hear of the wee man being banished on his account. So Master Theodore Everard sat perched as usual between father and auntie, and was the happy recipient of many a tit-bit from both. At dessert, Mr. Brandon, who was sharp-eyed to discern small evidences of character, noted with a benevolent smile how Dorothy picked out the rosiest apple on the dish and handed it to her brother to peel for baby, and gave him at least 2 spoonfuls of her own share of the syrup from the preserved pineapple to one she took herself, because he liked it so. "We must not teach him to be greedy, though, Dotty," said Everard. "That would not be really kind." "Oh, he isn't greedy a bit, he's a love," said Dotty, who could not resist the pleading of the little neck craning towards her with red mouth expectantly open like a nesting bird, and in went her last scrapings of the luscious juice. Whereat baby smacked his lips with suggestive gusto and pointed towards the dish. "Baby has a devoted aunt, I see," said Mr. Brandon, quietly laying on Dorothy's plate a fine walnut which he had succeeded in peeling whole. "The only fear is that she will spoil him," said Everard, "in which case it will be my clear duty to be extra severe with my son." But he spoke with his tenderest smile, and added, reaching behind baby to stroke Dotty's hair, "My little sister Dorothy has been a true gift of God to me from the first day she came to us. My dear mother could not have left me a more precious legacy. Few who are even fathers can point to a child who has never wilfully disobeyed them in her life, but that I can say, I think, of my Dotty. And now she is getting to an age to understand and intelligently cooperate with me in all that is right, so that perfect sympathy, I hope, will soon, in most things, take the place of mere obedience." Dotty's face and ears were crimson. She threw one imploring glance at her brother, which no one understood, but her tongue seemed paralysed. "That is as it should be. That is the ideal state of things between a good parent and a good child," said Mr. Brandon. "And a parent's place, of course, you occupy to Dorothy. But obedience, glad, trustfully, unwavering obedience, is the foundation of it all. I am truly delighted, my dear little girl, that your brother is able to speak of you as he does. Go on as you have begun, and our Father in heaven will both bless you and make you a blessing." Redder and redder grew Dotty's neck and brow, lower and lower she drooped her eyes. Beneath the table, her nervous fingers were rolling a bit of walnut skin into a ball. Mr. Brandon and Everard thought that natural modesty was receiving so much praise was the sole cause of those burning blushes. But no glow of such happiness in the approval of her dear brother as should have been hers warmed Dorothy's heart. She felt intensely, utterly miserable and ashamed. Oh, how mean it was to sit there under false colours, tacitly accepting commendation she did not deserve. Her one act of conscious disobedience stood out in her memory like a huge ink stain upon a fair picture, showing the blacker because it has been hidden long. If any of my readers think hers was a trifling fault to feel so badly about, I must remind them that the whiter the conscience, the darker does any soil of wrongdoing appear upon it. How should she shook Everard and shake his confidence in her, and forfeit his good opinion by owning what she had done? It would only grieve him and make him unhappy, and do nobody any good. Dorothy forgot that the truth, for its own sake, is above all price and pain, as it was to feel that she had even one secret from her brother. She yielded to moral weakness and still kept silence. Gradually, no one knew how baby went off his legs altogether and got about by crawling or rather shuffling along the floor instead. This was very disappointing, after having toddled so nicely for over a month, but Mrs. Hopkins told his father that he was cutting his teeth through his loins, whatever that might imply, and would pick up again by and by. Meanwhile, he made up for the deficiency by learning fresh words apace. His dear silvery prattle was the music of the house, and almost every day when Everard came home, Dorothy was able to report to him something new or funny that their darling had said. But she did not now encourage him to call her Auntie. It reminded her of that never-to-be-forgotten hour in the orchard when he had first uttered those syllables, the thought of which always made her uncomfortable, and he, untaught, got into the pretty way of saying "dear Dot" instead.